Okay, welcome everyone. For those who have just joined, we're just taking a moment to introduce ourselves in the chat. You're welcome to do so as well. My name is Beth Lormer and I'm the Ecological Justice Program Coordinator at Kairos Canada. I am here representing For the Love of Creation, which is a faith-based initiative for climate justice. I would like to begin with an acknowledgement of the land, and that we are gathering today on traditional territories of Indigenous peoples across Turtle Island. We pay respect to the traditional guardians of the land upon which we live, work, and play. I acknowledge that I am joining you today from the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe peoples on the banks of the Kitchissippi River, also known as the Ottawa River. I have brought some water from that watershed to be with us, just as a reminder of my gratitude for the life it sustains. We acknowledge that Indigenous peoples are the traditional guardians of Turtle Island, on the land also known as Canada. We recognize their long-standing and ongoing relationship with this territory, which includes unceded and traditional land, and acknowledge our duty to walk with and alongside reconciliation and decolonization efforts. As a settler, I believe I have a responsibility to continually engage in a journey to reassess and reconsider my position in the spaces I occupy, to learn how to embody allyship and to use my voice to speak out against systemic injustices experienced by Indigenous peoples. Reconciliation is an ongoing process requiring unlearning colonial practices and history alongside relearning our shared past, present, and future. At this time, I invite you to take a moment to place your feet on the ground as you are able, and to take a moment to acknowledge the territory where you are joining us from today. Thank you. So just a few housekeeping rules, and then I'll make some notes, and then I'll make some introductions. Please keep yourself muted during the presentations, and just to give respect to our speakers. This session is being recorded, but will be paused during the breakout room discussions, and a recording will be made available to all the registrants by email. Our chat function is enabled, and we will invite you to pose questions to the speakers using the chat function. Oh, sorry. So I'm just going to stop my sharing so that we can see each other a little bit more intimately and clearly. This event is being sponsored by three groups: EnviroMuslims, the Reformed Jewish Community of Canada, and For the Love of Creation. Your facilitators for today's event include me, Arij Riaz from EnviroMuslims, Rabbi Gila Kane from Temple Beth Ora in Edmonton. Our colleague Shannon Neufeld from Kairos was an integral member of the organizing team, and she's also joining us today. This event is intended to bring together different faith traditions and perspectives on why we do climate justice work, and share teachings, ritual, prayer from our traditions that inspire that work. The purpose of the event is to offer a moment of reflection and to build a stronger faith-based network to take action together. We hope it is the beginning of further conversation and collaboration. And so a quick overview of our time together today. We will begin with presentations from our guest speakers representing Muslim, Indigenous, Christian, and Jewish traditions. Following each speaker, there will be a brief moment to ask questions. And following the speakers, we will then, excuse me, we will go into small group discussions in breakout rooms. We'll then return for a brief moment of reflection on what we discussed in those breakout rooms, and then we'll close with a some brief announcements and a grounding. I'm now going to pass things over to Arij, who is going to introduce our first speaker. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm Arij. I'm the Director of Climate Programs at EnviroMuslims. We're beginning our discussion with Sheikh Yusuf Wahab, who will be sharing how Muslims around the world are compelled to seek and accord climate justice based on religious principles. Before I introduce him, please note that if you do have any questions for our speakers, you can note them in the chat, as Beth had mentioned. We will be asking the speakers to respond to a few of those at the end of their talk. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce Sheikh Yusuf Wahab, who is an Islamic law instructor at the University of Windsor's Faculty of Law, Yaqeen Institute's research director and associate editor, and LexisNexis family law author. He holds a Master's of Law, LLM from University of Windsor, and a Bachelor in Islamic Studies from Al-Azhar University. Imam Yusuf also serves as a co-founding board member of Green Ummah and as a founding board member of the University of Windsor Muslim Chaplaincy and an Islamic compliance advisor at Beneficent Relief. Currently, Sheikh Yusuf is completing his second master's at the University of Chicago Divinity School. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Reed, and thanks, Beth, for the introduction. I'm really glad that I'm here with this fantastic group. I have a special passion for interfaith conversations, specifically when it comes to one of the topics that I'm very passionate about, which is the topic of the environment. And I really feel that the different faith systems or or different religions in general have actually a lot to say about the environment. So when we try to incorporate all these different perspectives together, I think that provides us with so much insight on how to actually address at least some of the issues that we face with the issues of the environment in general. So to just give a quick overview of how Islam as a religion actually approaches the whole concept of environment. First of all, I would start by asserting that the engagement of Muslims with the environment and the sustainability movement in general is purely faith-based and is intellectually dependent from the dominant the dominant environmental agenda, and also practically independent from the current global political and economic establishments as well. That's why it always aims at a unique contribution model. To understand if Islam actually has something to offer when it comes to the environmental question, to understand how Islam as a religion itself operates, we need to understand its three main components that constitute its entire worldview. Islam has theology, has creedal principles, which makes or which shapes one's worldview. It has also a legal system, which is committing to practices based on legal injunctions. And it also has, thirdly, spirituality, reflecting a deeper connection with the universe as a sign of God's presence and glory. So to put all these three together, theology, law, and spirituality, this combination informs any solution-based discourse that Muslims seek to either adopt or establish from scratch when it comes to the environmental question. To shed a brief light on each of the three components, when we think from a theological point of view, from a creedal point of view, when we explore the Quran as the primary source of the three concepts or the three elements of theology, law, and spirituality, the occupants of this planet are described by the Quran as, and the word in Arabic is thaqalan. And this word in Arabic denotes the meaning of weighty burdens. Back in the days when the Quran was revealed 15 centuries ago, the Arabs, in whose language the Quran was revealed, used to say after the death of any tyrant obsessed with bloodshed, they used to make a statement saying that that person who died, that tyrant who died, was a weighty burden on the surface of the earth, and now the earth has lightened. So it's interesting how the Quran as well describes the presence of human beings on the planet to be also part of this meaning of a weighty burden, because Mother Earth, as the Quran tells us, will get a chance to speak on the Day of Judgment. After it discharges its burdens, as the Quran also says, that the earth will discharge all the burdens. And the Quran used the word burdens multiple times, that not only includes whatever type of creature, it actually includes initially and primarily human beings themselves. And the earth will discharge all its secret news, as the Quran also says. This spoken testimony in the Quran will be against human beings, demonstrating all that they have committed in their temporal lives on earth. Whether they were obedient to God, they were disobedient to God, they were good to God's creation, or they were evil to God's creation, the earth itself will actually testify for that or against that on the day of judgment. That's why what distinguishes an adherent of faith who believes in the power of God from a denier of a divine origination and sovereignty on creation is their worldview of the universe and their approach to its resources. Muslims interact with the universe with very well-defined limits. They do not assume absolute authority over the universe without a sanctioned authority. There's an interesting verse in the Quran that says, talking to both human beings and jinn, telling them, if you're able to penetrate through the regions of the heavens and the earth, then penetrate them. You will not penetrate except with an all-binding authority. The command, the imperative in this verse that tells jinn and mankind to penetrate is actually rhetorical, because it restates the priorities, the human priorities in the physical realm of life. And it also prompts the rethinking of our obligations towards the universe and the environment, that this universe is not created for you to do whatever you want. You have to have an all-binding authority. You have to have very well-defined limits and how to approach and use the resources of this universe. When this framework is lost, corruption prevails. The most commonly cited Quranic verse when it comes to the topic of environmentalism or the environment that talks about the deteriorated state of the planet is a verse known in the Quran to have said that corruption has appeared throughout land and sea by reason of what the hands of people have earned. Interestingly, the verse that actually comes before this verse in the Quran condemns polytheism, condemns shirk, as known in Arabic language, which is the concept of not believing in God or associating partners with God. And that previous verse as well establishes the createdness of our lives and what they contain or involve. So as if it relates the concept of prevailing corruption by what people physically do on earth to the concept of not actually believing in God to be the sublime power and the one with the ultimate authority over whatever human beings act on this earth. So these are a couple examples for how Muslims shape their understanding, their theological understanding of their approach to the universe and the resources around them. And then we move from spirituality to law, to the legal realm, to the actual practical practices of Muslims. When we look at it from a legal perspective, Islam has this set of 5 different defining legal rulings that every single act, every single practice of a human being, there is one type of a legal ruling that actually applies to it. It regulates one's relationship with God, one's relationship with people, one's relationship with the entire universe. The legal system in Islam spans across so many different topics. There are acts of worship, there are financial transactions, there is family law, there is criminal law, there is private law that covers other personal and familial transactions and contracts as well. So many different topics and diverse topics, as is the case with most legal systems. When we explore all these different legal topics, environmental concepts and issues are always present. And these concepts always strengthen the individual's relationship with the universe, like observing natural phenomena to determine the start and end of times of rituals, for example, that also triggers a kind of connection with the environment. They constantly prompt respect towards creatures, and they constantly trigger awareness of conserving resources. Examples are plenty. The list of relevant legal topics ranges from, again, ritualistic acts, starting from purification, prayer, which deals with water, dust, certain types of impurities, cleanliness, hygiene. Among rituals also is the annual obligatory donation that Muslims have to pay, which also prompts the understanding of equity of resources, of not only money, because annual obligatory donation Islam is not only about money, it's also about food, crops, livestock, minerals, even hidden treasures, even fasting. And we're just a few days away from the end of month of Ramadan. Fasting also prompts guiding and monitoring consumption, the pilgrimage, and all these examples are only within the ritualistic acts and not let alone the rest of the legal topics. The annual pilgrimage that some Muslims perform, it also regulates this concept of conservatory areas where it is prohibited to seize certain plants or hunt animals. So nature and resources are, again, present with the believer upon performing these foundational obligations. And it offers a very unique form of active worship in Islam. That when I'm fasting, when I'm paying donation, when I'm praying, when I'm making ablution, all these ritualistic acts, they're not only within, or they're not only reflecting personal or spiritual realms of my life, they actually involve a lot of natural phenomena or a lot of other creatures that God created that I need to approach them in a very particular manner. And of course, if we move from the ritualistic acts to the rest of the legal topics, again, environment will be always present across the different legal topics. So this is the second element of the religion of Islam. So first one was theology, second one is law, then the third one and the last one is spirituality. How can all of these practices and theological principles be reflected in the spiritual well-being of a Muslim? Because Islam views the composition of this universe as a reflection of God's qualities. Every aspect of this universe is a reflection of one or more of God's 99 names, which inspire Muslims to view every creation they observe or interact with as a sign of God's existence. And also as a community just like you, as the Quran says, talking about different creatures, like even ants, telling Muslims in the Quran, those are just nations like you, the communities like you. Part of the Muslims' spiritual striving is to cultivate in oneself the character traits of God himself. One of God's names is Al-Muhit, translated as the all-encompassing being, or the one that encompasses every single thing that actually happens in this life or in this universe. This name, only one out of 99 names of God that Muslims are required to embody and to reflect in their own lives. This name of God is just like one name of God, reflects the encompassing presence of God on the physical plane, underlying the sacredness of all creation, and the connection between the person, the human being, and all the other kinds of life and species on the planet. So spirituality, represented in massive Sufism literature in Islam, contains the most profound expression of an Islamic metaphysics and theology of nature, as some academics described. When we think even in the prophethood realm, when we think of prophets, all the prophets from Adam until Muhammad, that we find all of them, as far as we can understand from their literature, that they affirm that they have been sent to groups of people, or to all people, to mankind, to jinn, to all creatures, based on the domain of the prophet. And we find the example of Prophet Muhammad, in the case of Islam, for example, that he said, there is nothing between the heavens and the earth except that it knows I'm the messenger of God, except for the unbelievers or the deviants of jinn or mankind. The point here is not just to talk about the truthfulness of the religion of Islam as a religion. The point here is actually to reflect on why would the prophet include that all creatures in this universe, even though his main message was actually delivered to human beings. He's saying that it's a worldview, it's a theological principle, and it's a spiritual connection, that if you believe in me, if you believe in the religion of Islam, this is how you should view this entire universe. And this have also to reflect in the way you approach these resources on a theological level, on a legal level, and also on a spiritual level as well. So this is just a brief intro to how Muslims view the environment and how they are guided to approach its resources.
Thank you so much. I there's just one comment here that I'd like to share with you, Sheikh Yusuf. They said that they found a lot of similarities between their faith group and what you were talking about with Islamic principles. They do wonder if there is a uniform interpretation of theology, spirituality, and legal elements of Islam within the huge Muslim population around the globe, and you know, whether that kind of translates based on the different places that people are based in. I'm sure we would have some time during the breakout groups to kind of introspect that and reflect it during those conversations. But thank you so much for your time. I am going to pass it over to Gila.
Thank you very much, Arid, and thank you very, very much, Sheikh Yusuf. That was fascinating, and I have so many questions to think about with you. I would love to introduce now Kim Worker, who will speak to this subject from a Jewish perspective. And I'll just say that Kim is the co-founder and publisher at a small press in Vancouver, BC, on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. She sits on the executive committee of Temple Sholem and is on the board of the Reformed Jewish Community of Canada, the RJCC, through which she is involved with climate justice efforts as a member of the Tikkun Olam Steering Committee. She and her husband are looking forward to their son's bar mitzvah coming up at the end of the year. Mazal tov, Kim. So over to you.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I wish that I could provide sort of such a far-reaching and cohesive explanation of Judaism, but I am wholly unqualified to do that, and I don't think I could if I had 7 hours. So I'm here to speak mostly of my own experience as not as a religious leader, but as a very active participant in efforts within my own Jewish identity and engagement in the Jewish community and seeking climate justice. I'm not a religious person, really, myself. My faith is not really placed in the divine. I am a spiritual person, and I ground my spirituality in the pursuit of justice, which is a central tenet of Judaism. Sorry, I'm just gonna. Okay, sorry. It is from my faith in humanity, grounded in my Jewish identity and community, that I pursue climate justice. Pirkei Avot is an ancient Jewish text of rabbinic ethical teachings. It's incredibly popular and is frequently quoted and discussed. As a teenager in youth group who was prone to running in elections for leadership positions, I learned early on that Pirkei Avot is an infinitely quotable tome. You can often find something in there that relates to whatever challenge it is that you're facing. But there's one passage I think of often in the context of the climate emergency, which is an emergency of such massive magnitude and universal urgency, and is met with such a profound degree of popular inaction and government heel dragging that it can feel like an insurmountable challenge. Rabbi Tarfon is cited in Pirkei Avot to have taught the following in Hebrew. Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor, velo ata ben chorin lehibatel mimena, which translates to, it is not incumbent upon you to finish the work, but neither are you at liberty to neglect it. This one sentence encompasses so much of how my Jewishness influences my pursuit of climate justice, that I alone am not responsible to bring this work to conclusion, but at the same time, I am not free to become overwhelmed by it to the point that I do nothing. Apathy is not an option. The phrase has become like a mantra to me. My life is busy. I run a startup publishing company, which is not a sensible endeavor if you know anything about publishing. I have a child and a husband. I have local family and I have family far away. I have a lot of obligations in my immediate surroundings, but I am not at liberty to neglect the global work of pursuing climate justice. I must do something. At times, that something may be big, but most times that something must be small. For I'm only one person, and I must not neglect taking care of myself or my family or my friends or my community. I must do all of those things, and I must not neglect working toward climate justice. I find this whole concept deeply comforting. I find that this concept motivates my desire not ever to be alone in my pursuit of climate or any other form of justice. Justice is something we achieve only in community, and I must not rely on community to pursue justice without me. I am not at liberty to neglect it or to assume someone else will do the work or that the work can be done without each of us doing our part. It's not within my moral right to disengage. But because I am not responsible to finish the work, I'm able to stop myself from becoming overwhelmed by the magnitude and urgency of it. I'm free to balance this work alongside my other obligations. And if I need to pull back, I pull back. If I can't march on the streets, I can support the folks who march. If I can't afford to make a financial donation, I can give of my time. If I can't give of my time, I can provide other kinds of support as I'm able. This ethical teaching is like many of the other aspects of Judaism that I find comforting and grounding in its practicality. It lays out for me a path I must choose to walk at my own pace and in company of my choosing. And it reminds me that a rest along the path must end with a resumption of the journey. Climate change, I find, is terrifying, and it's here. And there's still so much we can and must do to prevent it from getting worse. The only way we can achieve that is together. And together, we must find ways to manage our contribution to this overwhelming task. For me, I find a way to navigate all of this through the traditions of Judaism. So as a reminder, each of us is not individually responsible to solve the climate emergency, but we all must help. And that is sort of what I had. I know that the original plan was for a very learned rabbi also to share far more knowledgeable remarks as well, and they were unable to be here today. But thank you so much for having me.
Kim, thank you very much for sharing Pirkei Avot and your thoughts with us. And I think it's important to see, actually in a spiritual context, to see lay leadership of people who may not use all their time to do religious work, but whose spirituality is important for them, and religious and spiritual work is important. So thank you very much for your learned remarks and for sharing them with us. Do we have a minute if somebody has a question? But if not, we will keep these thoughts in mind. And when we go into our breakout rooms, people can ask you more questions and share their thoughts with you. So I'll pass this on. Oh, can you repeat the quote, please? So yeah, you know what, Kim, if you can please put that in the chat box. Thank you. And I will now pass this on to Beth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi Gila and Kim, for your words. And yeah, it is now my pleasure to introduce the next speaker, who is Wasekam. Wasekam is a Turtle Clan Anishinaabe from Saugeen First Nation and the Kettle, Stony, and Stony Point First Nations on the southeastern shores of Lake Huron. He has led ceremonial canoe journeys throughout the Great Lakes to raise awareness about water, climate change, and Indigenous sovereign responsibilities. His great passion is in building agency for Indigenous-led nation building. And if we had met in person, I would have offered Wasekam some tobacco and asking him to share his spiritual knowledge with us today. And so I am just recognizing the limitations of this virtual space that it places on kind of fulfilling that important protocol. But I'm grateful to Wasekam that he has joined us today to share his wisdom and experience with us. So over to you, Wasekam.
How miigwech, Beth. I just wanted to let you know that I did bring my own tobacco today, and sometimes it's not required, because if it's in the realm of what we've been governed to do, then we'll just go ahead and do it, you know. And that's kind of where I really wanted to start. It's like I was always told we don't need special accommodation to do what we've been governed to do. And one thing as an Anishinaabe person, but also collectively, it's our responsibility, our sacred responsibility, to take care of Turtle Island, this earth where we're from. And I just wanted to greet everyone who's here living on an Anishinaabe or Indigenous place. I myself am actually calling in from the unceded territories of the Squamish Nation. I'm actually on the Capilano Reserve in West Vancouver. And it's I'm really grateful to be an invited visitor here. Part of the reason why I brought my tobacco, and I didn't really prepare anything in advance, because the title of this conversation was spirit-led. And I really wanted to come from that place of like sharing what's within my heart, and also just from the journey that I've been on, just kind of stop and share a few things about at least where I'm coming from as an Anishinaabe person, like an Indigenous person experiencing this life and these sacred times that we're in. I can't really speak for even my own nation, let alone all of the breadth of diversity here on Turtle Island. From one side to the other, there's such an incredible diversity that there's no pan-Indigenous identity or framework to work from. And I think it's in that sort of distinctions-based recognition and understanding that I've been finding a lot of internation kinship. And I think that's a really important place to also begin. 10 minutes is a really short time to try to encapsulate some of these things, but kinship is a really big term that's being used right now. But it really just describes like the relatedness to one another, to the earth, to the water, you know, to all parts of creation. And especially in relation to an interfaith conversation or a global like planetary conversation, the container in which we're to take action, seek justice, turn things around is really through that lens or that experience of kinship. As Indigenous people, I think we have a really unique role to play, especially in an interfaith global context, given that we're sort of been pushed off to the side by most states, by most religions, by most conventional man-made institutions, and we're not really affixed to a lot of those particular narratives. And I think when we're working together, part of that, the container that's going to help us turn things around is really through that kinship. And I've been really fortunate and really blessed to have experienced kinship, not only where I come from, but also across nations, and then also at a global level. And that way of making kin is just inherent in who we are as a people. So it's actually quite easy to just do that with your relatives who are from one place or who are across the ocean. Everywhere you go, there's an Indigenous nation somewhere here on Mother Earth. The other part I wanted to just really briefly mention was around the times that we're in. As Anishinaabe people, we don't really have like written law. A lot of what was written was either written on stone or written what we call birch bark scrolls, and is recorded through our oral knowledge. And of course, with the layer of colonial disruption and genocide, everything that we've been through, certain things have been lost along the way, but there's a lot that has survived. And we're in this really beautiful time where we're coming back as peoples here on Turtle Island. And with that coming back is this remembrance, this beautiful remembrance of like the truth of who we are as like as also creators people, you know, who are distinct, who are sovereign, and who are a nation of people, right? And I say that those words as nationhood is not just a state of affairs, or sovereignty is not just a state, it's a state of being within, right? That was given to us by the Creator. And when we embody that, when we move within that, we remember this incredible legacy of knowledge of how to take care of the earth. So like climate action, climate justice looks different wherever you go. On Turtle Island, it looks different to different people. And so that could just simply mean like just being a good steward. What does it mean to be a good steward of the earth, right? How do we help creation rebound in areas that have been desecrated or that have been diminished by resource extraction or like the human impact, right? How do we just simply take care, like on a really basic level? And then as well, when we perceive this world where we're at, you know, there's this change that's already happened. There's a cascade effect that's already taking place. And when we look back to our ancestors and the writings that they left for us and the stories that they left for us, you know, that comes into the realm of prophecy in our oral tradition. And we were told that there's this time that we're coming into of great change. And people call that the lighting of the seventh fire or the eighth generation. And to our people, it's not actually considered a really amazing time, you know, like it's a time of great upheaval and change. So we're also like very cautious about how we embody or enact that next part of our prophecy, which is when the time of many nations coming together, right? We're really cautious about that because it represents actually a time of great loss as well. And we were always told it's our responsibility to survive the changes, not necessarily like fix everything. And in these climate conversations, Indigenous people are also often called in at the 11th hour to like help provide your ecological wisdom to help turn this all around, you know. And we're always in this position: do we give or do we withhold or hold back, you know? And so I'm trying to tie multiple layers together, which is really hard to do in 10 minutes. So part of this, like this prophecy or this story that we're living through, you know, we do have a very sacred role, or a very important role, an integral role to play in how we start to turn things around. And this lighting of this next fire of this story that we were given many years ago, actually prior to colonization, this story has survived. And we're always cautious because we need to, or this time that we're in right now, part of the responsibility or part of like that call to action, or how we can enact climate justice or climate action, is actually to create an extension of time, not to rush towards the change, the big change, that the cascade. It's actually to pull back and to create time for creation itself, the natural world, to rebound. And we know, over the last couple of years, we've witnessed that if we allow creation the time, it will rebound. And that's like, and so just on a really practical level, and how I embody that in my practice is, you know, how can I cause less harm? What can I let go of, like, in order to create, give creation the space to respond. And I think that's something I can meaningfully share with everyone, is how in our processes, in our institutions, in our ways of being, in our daily lives, can we actually let go of. And there's this term that's coming out, like that people are starting to speak of, around hospicing, right? Hospicing modernity, hospicing these ways of being, and that's sort of like a really good way to explain the time that we're in the time of this letting go. And are we going to hold on to all the things that are causing us harm, when those are the things that are exacerbating the problems that exist? And so as an Anishinaabe person, like I'm on this particular journey right now that I would love to go into, just around the more than human beings. Because also as Anishinaabe people, our first teachers is the natural world. And we also have our clans. Like I'm Turtle Clan Anishinaabe, and that's my leader, right? It's like actually a non-human centered way of perceiving the world, but also how we derive our original governance, and what situates us here on Turtle Island, how we belong to the earth and also to one another. And you know, I often wonder how, especially with relation to the water, the oceans, how are we listening to the more than human world, the more than human beings, and what are they saying? How do we align ourselves with their perspectives? You know, because they're not sort of conditioned and obligated to all these man-made structures. So that's a whole other area that I would love to get into, but just I wanted to say thank you, you know, for this opportunity to share and connect with everyone. Yeah, miigwech. Yeah, thank you.
Miigwech Wasekam. And yes, more limitations around colonial timing, and having more time for you to just speak from the spirit. But I am so appreciative for your words that you did share. And again, this is just the beginning of further conversation. So maybe we can unpack more of that with you at a future gathering. But
I love to visit. I love visiting. So that door is open if anybody would like to visit. I'm a pretty good visitor. So yeah,
that's true.
Just leaving that invitation.
That's wonderful. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we're going to carry Wasekam's words with us, and I'm going to introduce our next speaker. Is Dr. Anupema Ranawana. Anu is a theologian and political economist with over 8 years of experience working in academia and international development. Her research and teaching expertise and interests are focused on gender and justice, decolonial thought, diversifying research methodological practice, religious thought in the Global South, faith and international development, and intersections between racial and climate justice. She holds degrees in theology and international politics, and her most recent publication has been on the importance of women's religious thought to global politics. Her book, A Liberation for the Earth, Reflections on Race, Climate, and Cross, was published just recently. So I encourage you to check that out. And Anu is joining us from the UK today. And so I thank her so much for staying up late to be with us. It is such a gift, and I'm going to pass it over to you now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you, everyone, for having me. I feel really honored to be here with all of you, with this great panel of speakers. I love doing interfaith work. It's one of my great passions. In fact, I think I said yes to Beth before I even checked the time that it would be at. I grew up in a household that was interfaith. One parent was Buddhist and the other one was Catholic. So I hold all of this very close to my heart. And I think particularly in terms of ecological justice, this is where religions can come together and build alliances. I'll make some quick remarks, and I just wanted to frame that what I say comes particularly from when I think the invitation to speak from a Christian space. So I speak from a very particular Christian space, of course, and also I speak as a layperson and also as a religious studies scholar who is often from the global south. So I just wanted to sort of frame that a little bit. There are so many different Christian approaches to thinking and talking about climate justice, and certainly I don't speak for all of them. In fact, when I was writing my book, one of the things I found is how long the discussion on climate justice and ecological justice in the different Christian traditions were. As far back as 4th century BC, Gregory of Nazianzus talking about the ways in which we are living and how unjust it is to the earth. So there's two things in particular drawing here from the Catholic tradition that have very much come to the fore of meditation and activism or practice. The first is what is called the effects of the encounter. If anyone has encountered the writings of Patriarch Bartholomew, he writes beautifully about the fact that for Christians, we have to reflect on the fact that we are transformed, or if you believe you are transformed by divine grace, then you have the moral imperative to understand the kinds of injustices in which we have been participants, and then to start the work to share the resources of the planet. And when we realize all of this, and when we feel the effect of the encounter with the divine, we can only realize, we have to realize then that ecological justice is paramount, not only just to have better lives, but for our very survival. And that's such a very profound thing. And it's underscored, I think, in Laudato Si, which is the papal encyclical. And in the papal encyclical, we are drawn back, Christians at least, or Catholics in this case, are drawn to thinking and looking at the cross and to looking at the person of Jesus Christ. And there's a reminder there that the effect of that encounter is that it goes beyond sort of saying you believe. It is understanding that a Christian faith, acknowledging that Christ is the center point of human history and also of creation. And because of this, to understand that the unfolding of the universe, the flowering of life and earth are centered on Christ. And if we agree to this, then we also have to agree that the destruction of any parts of creation, especially the extinction of species, defaces the image of Christ, which is etched in creation. A friend of mine who's a school teacher here in a Christian school often says, like, would you spit on a photograph of or an icon of Christ? No, you wouldn't. So if you think of creation in the same way, is how he teaches his classes. And I think in a way it's quite a simple but an effective image to use. I think what we have, particularly from Patriarch Bartholomew and Pope Francis, for Christians, there's a challenge to a profound interior as well as community conversion, which asks us to work towards transforming the moral imagination and also building a global solidarity that works towards ecological justice. And in my work in international development, in my work as a religious studies scholar from the Global South, I think it's also really important to listen to the voices of those from the Global South, particularly those who are facing the immediate and urgent, and who are, in crisis at the moment, and these voices that have been calling for justice for a very long time, and who see that the struggles for liberation of the earth and of humans and animals are all conjoined together. Theologians of the Global South that I've spoken to and work with and try to call myself a part of call for a moral reckoning. And one of the things they talk about is that churches in the North have still not come to grips with the degree to which Christian theology and tradition are implicated in capitalist development, which has dominated countries for so long, and who are part of the exploitation and domination of human and land and ocean that we see. And that's in a sense, it's like a calling to that moral reckoning, to that sort of recognition. In particular, this is about, for Christians in particular, from mainline churches like Catholic and Anglican churches, it's about recognizing their role in the European colonial project that entrenched these ideologies of domination and exploitation. So in sum, the effects of the encounter that cause conversion to ecological justice drive us to change and also to action. And this action is interfaith, it's intersectional, it's frameworked by solidarity. And it plays out in different ways, of course, for those who have been part of this for a very long time. You see it in activism, in prayer, in liturgy, in the greening of church spaces, and so on. Beth in her email asked me to share a prayer if we had one, and I do have one, which some of you may be familiar with. It's from the Anglican tradition. It's a prayer from the Chinook Psalter from the Book of Common Prayer for All the Nations. And I think I've been using it for my sort of springtime meditation. And it goes like this: May we today be touched by grace, fascinated and moved by your creation, energized by the power of new growth at work in your world. May we move beyond viewing this life only through a frame, but touch it and be touched by it. Know it and be known by it, love it and be loved by it. May our bodies, our minds, our spirits learn a new rhythm paced by the rhythmic pulse of the whole created order. May spring come to us, be in us, and recreate life in us. And the reason why this speaks to me the most is I'm from an island, I'm Sri Lankan, I live on another island, they're two very different islands, and I live by the sea, and that constant movement of the ocean, I walk by the sea, and the terrifying awe of the sea reminds me of that constant need to surrender to the Creator God, to be humble, and to work for action. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Anu, and for sharing that prayer with us at the end. That was just a really nice way to wrap up. So I'm just seeing the time. We're going to kind of move our conversation into the small group discussion. So I'm just going to pass it over to Arij to do that. But thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time and for your wisdom. It was amazing hearing all of you. There was so much insightful learning. So I'm really looking forward to what we're going to be doing next. Gita is kindly setting up the breakout rooms for us. We will be moving into these rooms. We hope that they provide everyone the chance and the space to apply some of the learning from the speakers, and to also reflect on how our own individual faith, our beliefs, or our moral principles and values govern ethical behavior towards the environment and every living species that is supported by it. We will be in the breakout rooms for around 15 minutes or so. Beth is going to be sharing some slides back. Are you able to do that? Okay, perfect. So our esteemed speakers have kindly provided us with some guiding questions that can be used as a basis for, consider this as a reflection exercise during the breakout rooms. The questions should be on the screen now, and we can also share them in the chat with you, so you have access to them while you're in the breakout rooms. And please also feel free to copy these questions to keep them handy for you. You can choose to answer one or more or all of the questions. The idea is just to use them as a basis for discussion between your breakout groups, to use them as kind of like introspection, and to get the ball rolling on discussing with one another and sharing what your beliefs are, and yeah, how do your moral values and principles govern ethical behavior towards the environment. After the time is over, the breakout rooms are going to be dissolved, and we'll all come back to be together in this same bigger group for us to share some key takeaways before we close. We'll also be doing a little mindful exercise before we wrap up today.
So just to note, I did stop sharing just so I could put those questions in the chat. So you're welcome to note them. They should be viewable once you are in the breakout rooms. But if you would like to copy them, you are welcome to, and just to have them on hand.
Thank you. So I'm going to open the breakout rooms and have fun. Okay, so I hope everyone had an interesting and fruitful conversation. You were able to share some thoughts. We do have a few minutes to maybe share a few reflections from the different groups, but we do have only a few minutes. So I would like to invite a few people to maybe share one thought of something that came up for them that was interesting and you would like to bring to the wider group. And if you would like, you can raise your hand and then unmute. Yes, what Beth said. You're welcome to share thoughts in the chat because it might be a bit intimidating. Oh, I see someone has raised their hand. Can you unmute yourselves or do you need us to unmute you?
I'm already unmuted.
Perfect.
A comment was made in our group, very supportive of the quotation. It is not incumbent upon us to finish the work, but it is not to neglect the work. And that's, to me, is both a strong ethical imperative to be involved and to work for climate justice. But it also is, as the person in our group said, it's also freeing because it doesn't push us to try to do it all. Yeah, there are limits to what we are expected to do, and for our own spiritual well-being, we're not to overdo it. I guess that's both sides of that quotation are very good.
Thank you very much. And I think that goes for individuals as well as for groups, right? Like as groups, we also don't have to do it by ourselves in our own group, but join in with others. Dawn, yeah, thank you.
In our group, we rejoiced in getting to know each other, and because we were from such diverse groupings, we talked about working together and what we're going to do going forward, seeing as together we are stronger, united we're stronger, that we can have a larger voice and work together. Because this is a long drawn out war, for lack of a better word, to grow and care for our creation as we see our faith path developing. And it was just an exciting thought that there are others out there and we're not alone. And so we're looking forward to growing into the future.
Thank you very much. Toda. Thank you. Ashel?
Sorry, am I on my screen?
Yes, you're unmuted. You're good. We can see you.
Okay. So I think in our group, we were struck by Wasakam's teaching. And what I heard in that is that this is a big thing that we're up against. And it's okay to say you don't know. It's okay to pause and listen, and in particular, we need to be listening to the voices of the non-human beings around us, and I'm also putting that together with something that one of the other speakers said about listening to people from the global South. So I heard a permission to not to have to charge forward, not knowing where we're going, but rather to admit what we don't know, to listen, and to try to build a movement that way.
Thank you very much, Ashel. I think we might have time for one more person to share.
I heard in chat
Briefly. Yes.
that hope is idolatry.
Sorry, Olga. I'm not sure I'm hearing. Is there someone who wanted to share, or?
I think it was just an accidental.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we heard a lot today. We heard a lot. We had a lot. I feel there's a lot to think about here and take with us for further contemplation and work that we can do with ourselves and with others around us. And I want us to leave this space, this special sacred space that we've created together over the past hour and so, which I hope is an opening for a wider conversation, but to end this time here, to ground ourselves back in where we are, and to go into allow ourselves to go into places that are a bit beyond knowing, okay? Because we always think we need to know. So like people have said here before, we don't have to know. So I'd like to share a short meditation with you. And you're welcome to close your eyes if you would like, to sit comfortably in your chair or on the floor, wherever you're sitting. You can either close your eyes or just let them focus softly on something. Feel your breathing as you're breathing. Feel the air going into you, the neshima, right? The breathing, the breath, which is also, at least in Hebrew, the same word almost as the word for soul. So as we are breathing, we are connecting with the wider soul of the universe, which is also our inner soul. And allow yourself to be in this breathing. Notice it going into your body and leaving your body and joining the outside. And as you're breathing and noticing your breath, count slowly backwards from 10 to 1. So begin with 10, 9, and allow yourself to go back at your own pace, according to your own breathing. And as you're breathing backwards, perceive the world shifting with your breaths from multiplicity to unity. Feel this with your breathing as you're going back. And when you get to the number 1, as you're breathing this, count backward one last time to whatever is before 1. Counting before 1, try and think or feel or smell, somehow perceive what is before 1. What does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? What is it like to be you when you encounter that which is before 1? Allow yourself to be there for a few moments. Take one last deep breath into yourself. Bring in the neshama, the soul of the world, into you, into your own soul. Release it, breathe slowly out, and open your eyes. You're welcome to join us back here. Beth, it's you now.
Thank you so much, Gila. That was really nice way to center ourselves as we come out of that time together. I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank our speakers, to Brother Yusuf, Kim, Wasekam, and Anu for being so generous with your time and your teachings, and to encouraging us to reflect and discuss with one another. I'm just so grateful for it. I also wanted just to thank our my colleagues in the planning of this event, so Gila and Arij and Shannon. It was a really great to work with you, and again, we know this is just the beginning of a conversation. So as I mentioned before we started the event, the event was sponsored by EnviroMuslims, the Reformed Jewish Community of Canada, and For the Love of Creation. And basic contact information will be shared on the screen momentarily, but will also be put up in the chat. So please do reach out to us if you want to get in touch and get involved. We'll be also including a link to the For the Love of Creation newsletter. We are anticipating future opportunities to gather. So if you are interested in being part of the planning of future multi-faith occasions, or if you know of a group you would want us to reach out to, please put that information in the form that we are also going to put out in the chat. So I'm just going to share some of that contact information with all of you now. And here is the link to it's a Google form, so I encourage you to just copy that or open it right now and take a moment to fill that in. And I will just share for the sake of accessibility and just because it's nice to see it all up, I'll just share one more time my slides with that contact information. So there we go. And so that brings us to the end of our event today. We will be sending around a follow-up email where we will include a link to the recording, and we will also share out some of the key things that were shared, the prayers and other teachings and the contact information. So please do look for that email this week. And we hope to see you in this space again. I hope everyone has a wonderful evening. And thanks for joining us.